Welcome to Eco Africa. I am Sandra Twinovideo here in Kampala. Today's show is all about one of the world's most valuable resources, water.
That's right, Sandra. The World Health Organization says 1 in 3 people do not have access to safe drinking water. But that's not the only thing we're going to be looking at in today's show. In some countries, this essential resource has also become the subject of huge disputes between residents and companies, raising the question of who the water actually belongs to. But let's start with the problem of accessing clean water. Did you know 6% of deaths in low-income countries are a direct result of disease caused by unsafe water? Our first report today comes from Zimbabwe and looks at a positive example of harvesting rainwater that's helping a lot of people.
In the morning, Sheba Ngara steps out of her house to fetch water from the tank in her yard. She's only had the cistern for 5 years. It's a lifesaver for the single mother who, like other farmers in Zimbabwe, faces increasing challenges because of climate change. Sheba Ngara grows everything she needs to sustain her family on a small plot of land.
The fields haven't produced much these past seasons. We either get too little or too much rain. The sense of uncertainty has made it hard for the children to concentrate on their schoolwork. Before I had this water harvester, when the rains came, the water would just run off in waste. We had no idea what to do with it. Sometimes we collected a little in small tins and buckets.
But that didn't help during dry spells. For years, Zimbabwe's droughts have increased in frequency and duration. The consequences are dramatic. Its famous Victoria Falls were reduced to a relative trickle in 2019, making international headlines. This year hasn't seen enough rain either. The corn in the fields isn't growing properly. Harvest yields are shrinking year by year. The UN says almost half of Zimbabwe's population of some 15 million is now dependent on food aid. People with no access to a well have to get their water from rivers that are also drying up. The aid agency CARE has helped solve the water shortage in Sheba Ngara's village in the country's southeast. It's supplied 50 families with water tanks, and together, the community has built a dam that holds 45,000 cubic meters of water. The water flows along the terrain's natural slopes to irrigate the fields, eliminating the need for a climate-damaging diesel pump.
As long as we have several options to store rainwater efficiently, we stand a chance of survival, even through the dry season. We can afford to grow food for our families, whether there is rain or not, during any given year.
Since the dam supplies water directly to our gardens, the farmers no longer have to travel far in search of water. They cannot get it from the water troughs right in the garden.
The farmers have another pressing problem that still needs to be solved. The water from the reservoir isn't safe to drink.
If we could get underground borehole water, it will be a welcome development that will save us the burden of looking for safe drinking water.
There are already a few ideas. CARE has drilled 12 wells in the region. Some are equipped with solar pumps. That saves money and protects the climate. Every well should be able to supply 500 people along with their gardens. There's a designated repair team to make sure everything stays in good working order. That creates jobs, including for women like Precocious Mukati, who is a mechanic.
A borehole can't be inoperable for more than a day to ensure the availability of clean water. If it's out of service for several days and left unattended, it can become a target of vandalism, and some individuals might end up messing around with the parts.
CARE wants to train even more women, but doesn't currently have the funding. Yet, women shoulder the main burden of climate change.
Women are the greatest hit, or the hardest hit, with the water challenges. Why? Because they are the ones that shoulder the responsibility of water. at a household.
Sheba Ngara is visiting the neighboring community of Zvavagona to see its new wells. Locals have planted a large garden that is irrigated entirely with groundwater.
There is plenty of water here. I'm amazed at how, in addition to being used for farming, the system is also designed to provide clean water to the surrounding communities. I hope a system like this can be installed in my village too one day.
But in many areas of Zimbabwe, even the groundwater is being depleted by drought. That's why, regardless of where the water comes from, priority should be given to conserving it.
The fight for water has increased in recent decades, affecting nearly all parts of the planet. It's not just regions that struggle with high temperatures or arid conditions like many places here in Africa. It's also an issue in Europe. In France, a multinational food company is bottling local water to sell it around the world, and that's proven highly controversial.
This is a fish farm, but you're more likely to find plants than fish in its ponds. There's too little water, but that wasn't always so. For centuries, water cascaded down from the mountains near this farm here in the Massif Central region. As recently as 2018, a stream fed Edouard de Féligon's ponds with a steady supply of fresh, clean water.
The water from the cave used to stand at about this level. And today there's nothing left. Today the water is bottled, and 70% of it is exported.
The fish farmer now fears for his livelihood. He doesn't blame climate change for his plight, but rather international food processing giant Danone. It extracts mineral water from the surrounding region to bottle and sell worldwide under the brand name Volvic. Locals complain that despite repeated droughts, Volvic is siphoning more and more water from the area with no regard for their needs. Volvic rejects their claims.
You must keep in mind that we don't just do whatever we want. We're subject to and monitored by the authorities, and the authorities might appear at any time to inspect our boreholes in order to confirm that the statements we make in our data are correct. In August 2020, for example, there were 2 such unannounced visits.
François-Dominique de la Rosière, a geologist, is very familiar with this region, characterized by extinct volcanoes. He says there are still plenty of natural water sources, but they're dwindling as a result of generous contracts awarded by the regional government to Danone.
The prefect grants far too many authorizations. And more seriously, on the 31st of March this year, the prefect put in place a new drought decree in case of heat wave and water problems. And he miraculously exempted Volvic by saying it's underground water, it doesn't involve them.
But many studies indicate the opposite. The flow rate of the small stream, which supplied Edouard de Féligon's fish ponds, has fallen dramatically in recent summers, in part due to the water extraction.
We went from 470 liters per second or 510 liters per second in 1960 to nothing at all, and all for the benefit of Danone.
For now, he hopes summer rain will fill his ponds, but that the regional authorities will reconsider the agreements they've made with Danone in the long run.
2 children, 2 continents, 1 giant problem.
In my leven heb ik nog net gezien een beetje rien.
How will climate change affect us and our children? Learn more at dw.com/water.
Get this, the World Wildlife Fund says 2/3 of the global population could face water shortages by just 2025. This advancing trend means water is increasingly being used for political or economic gain.
That is right, and it means states with more water have more leverage. This creates inequalities and ultimately a system that is not sustainable for our planet. Let us take a closer look to unpack this better.
Around 4 billion people experience severe water scarcity at least 1 month a year. And when the water runs low, more comes at a cost. So why are we running out? And who is profiting? Just 1% of the water on Earth sustains all life, and it doesn't just disappear. It travels around the planet in what's called the water cycle. When the air is hot, it warms the water. Water then evaporates into the atmosphere. There it cools and condenses, forming clouds. They move around the planet horizontally in what are called atmospheric rivers. When there's enough water in a cloud, it rains. And if it's cold enough, it snows. In the spring, snow melts to feed rivers, providing a source of water to the land during the coming hot months of the year. But climate change is messing this all up. Rising temperatures mean more water falling as rain instead of snow. And the little snow there is evaporates rather than flowing downstream. Less snow means less water during the summer. In short, climate change speeds up the water cycle. More evaporation, more rain, more drought, and less water for us. And as the world population grows, we're using more and more of it. The question is, for what? Well, 70% of it goes to agriculture, and to support those levels, we've changed the natural way waters flow.
Especially in the 50s, 60s, but also later, we've seen really a boom of dam building because everyone wanted, for good reasons, to use water resources to lift people out of poverty and to boost economic development.
Susanne Schmeier is an associate professor in water law and diplomacy at IHE Delft, an education facility specifically dedicated to water.
Not only with dams, but generally with all water infrastructure that benefits a certain economic use or a certain sector over others, especially local communities, you have an increase in inequality in terms of who's using water.
Meanwhile, local people's wells are running dry. And what do you do then? Well, you drill a deeper well.
The challenge is that everyone may not have the right affordability to drill deeper every time to access groundwater. In such cases, people are depending on the external sources of water.
They can be water tankers or bottled water. But
of course, those water are far more costlier than the water that is supplied by the government.
On average, people with less money spend a higher percentage of their income on water. A minimum wage worker in the UK spent 0.1% of their income on safe water. In India, the country with the largest number of people lacking safe water, a low-income person spends 17% of their household income on water. In Madagascar, purchased water sucks up 45% of a low-wage worker's income. And lack of water causes more harm than just thirst. Persistent dehydration has severe health implications, and fetching water usually falls to women and girls, subjecting them to increased risk for assault. And water scarcity can also cause psychological trauma.
You can't even imagine that when you are in a queue for 1 or 2 hours, and when you are trying to when your turn comes, you are pushing the pump with the hope that maybe I will get some water, and then water is not coming.
Dr. Deepti Acharya is the author of a new book about the right to water. She was motivated to research the topic by her experience living with water scarcity.
So for me, I think water stress is beyond the figures. It is, I think, emotional loss,
And this emotional loss creates a market. Like for private water providers, who might take over when governments fail to provide clean water.
This might have positive short-term effects because if the company wants to make money, it's going to make sure that the water is clean, provided on time, regularly, and so on, because that's the way they make money.
And that's exactly what companies on the S&P Global Water Index are doing. It contains 50 international companies that provide water utilities and services like purification. As clean water becomes scarcer, these companies' services are more in demand. And the more business they get, the more investors earn. But privatizing isn't always the way to go. In many cases, it doesn't live up to expectations. That's because in most cases, privatized water is also more expensive.
A lot of people will fall through the grid and then not have water at all anymore.
There are those ready to profit from this situation as well. In India, many water tanks are controlled by a so-called water mafia.
They have started stealing water. They are collecting it, they are putting it in tanks, they are selling it. So their investment is zero, but their profit is 100%.
And then there's the bottled water industry, which is worth almost $3 billion and expected to grow by around 7% per year. Major players in the market include Coca-Cola and Nestle, which have been accused of both causing and profiting from water scarcity. In the United States and Canada, for example, Coke takes water from municipal sources, bottles it, and sells it to people who often don't have clean water at home. In India and Mexico, Coke was accused of severely depleting groundwater after opening bottling plants. And Nestle has come under fire for over-extracting water from Native American reservations in water-stressed California. So is there any way to ensure more people have safe, affordable, available water? Investing in infrastructure is the most direct way to improve access, both repairing broken or damaged pipes and building new connections, as well as wastewater recycling facilities. Another direct way is to reduce meat consumption, and the vast majority of our freshwater feeds industrial agriculture. Going further, starting a process of decommissioning dams and letting watershed ecosystems regenerate helps tackle the root of the problem. Another push is to give nature rights in the courtroom. This would mean people could bring court cases on behalf of rivers, for example, against their polluters. Still, the main problems remain. Much of the planet's fresh water is unsustainably managed, and climate change means there's less for us to use. But changing our diets and restoring our ecosystems can make a difference.
That has really given us a good overview of why water is so precious. Another issue is that the water supply in many areas is contaminated with chemicals, which these days are used in pretty much everything, including cosmetics. It was that very problem that motivated one entrepreneur to start making his own soap using all natural ingredients. And he is the focus of this week's Doing a Bit.
In Cape Verde, one entrepreneur is seeking to clean up the environment, one bar of soap at a time. Terra Verde is an ecological soap, which Carlos Silva makes using vegetable oils, green clay, flour, and other ingredients. He tries to source most of the ingredients locally.
8 years ago, I started out producing soap from cooking oil. It could be used to wash dishes. Then later, I began making this eco soap for people to use in the shower.
Silva's desire to help the environment motivated the move to producing ecologically sustainable cosmetic products.
Everything we use ends up in the sewer, which will then contaminate the rivers, oceans, and our groundwater.
Silva has now automated parts of the production process. Even the machines he uses are made from recycled materials. He can now produce more bars in much less time.
It used to take me 8 hours to make a batch, now it's only 3. A lot of the steps are automated now.
Carlos Silva hopes to sell his Terra Verde soap on the international market soon.
And how about you? If you're also doing your bit, tell us about it. Visit our website or send us a tweet. #DoingYourBit. We share your stories.
What a lovely idea. We wish him all the best with that. Now, we've spent much of the show so far discussing the problems and disputes surrounding the whole subject of water, but there are glimmers of hope too. People around the world are working to protect the environment, and that includes rivers and the streams.
That's right. We're going to cross to Ivory Coast now. Like in many countries, a lot of trash and plastic in Ivory Coast still ends up in streams and rivers and ultimately the sea. There it poses a threat to plant and marine life and to the local fishing industry. So scientists and volunteers have launched an initiative to clean up the waterways.
Just like generations before him, a fisherman casts his net into the Ebri lagoon. But the yields are no longer the same. Fish have become scarce in recent years as a result of pollution and habitat degradation. You can throw out the net as much as 10 times and not catch any fish. We did it twice and only got 2 small fish. Is that enough for us? It can't be enough. In years past, Akmel Adou could earn up to 300 euros a month during the season. Now, to make ends meet, he started making canoes. The largest can sell for the equivalent of 300 euros. I have children and one job is not enough to get by on. I have to branch out in order to earn enough money to take care of my children and myself. Boat building may have promise. With an area of 560 square kilometers, the Ebri Lagoon is separated from the Atlantic Ocean by a narrow coastal strip. Situated on its banks is Abidjan, Ivory Coast's economical capital. The push for growth has led to increased industrial activity. Many local companies treat the lagoon like a garbage dump, discharging industrial waste and sewage into the water. Scientists at the Ocean Research Center are trying to gauge the impact of the pollution. Samples have revealed the presence of pesticides and heavy metals such as mercury, arsenic, and lead. The researchers say the lagoon needs more protection and would like to see the authorities implement stricter laws. This kind of legal instrument is generally lacking in West Africa. Yes, there is talk about an integrated management system, but this management word is really limited. It's not efficient because it lacks legal instruments. That has led some citizens to take action themselves. Here in Tukuzu, around 100 kilometers west of Abidjan, the NGO SOS Forest wants to put an end to the clearing of mangrove forests. These areas are a treasure trove of biodiversity, and the trees' roots provide shelter for fish during reproduction. They also strengthen the soil against erosion and filter heavy metals out of the water. The NGO helps local residents organize planting schemes. Today's goal is 500 new trees. This solution will enable the restoration of resources that had disappeared or been degraded by human activity. But it will also improve the quality of life for residents. This island is kept afloat by 700,000 recycled plastic bottles. The project, which aims to raise environmental awareness, sits in the lagoon close to Abidjan. Once a month, the NGO 350 organizes educational trips here to teach children about the importance of recycling. We think that this kind of visit will help to encourage them to become ecologically minded. And in addition to that, also to enable them to be actors of change for a world to come. Fisherman Germain is optimistic. He believes the lagoon will recover and the fish will return. Yes, it will be okay. They'll come back, although I don't know when. But it will take some time. So Akmil Adu Germain may want to focus on his carpentry business for now.
That brings us to the end of today's show and our look at water as an essential resource. Hope you had some key takeaways and will cherish every single drop of water from now on. Hope to see you next week. Bye-bye from me in Kampala, here in Uganda.
Goodbye from me too. Don't forget to tune in next week. In the meantime, if you want to know more, get in touch on our social media platforms. Take care and stay safe. I am Chris Alems, signing off from Lagos, Nigeria.